There's a little bit of trepidation coming into this episode because I feel like we're taking a horror classic and something that maybe people haven't seen and pitting them against one another. I hope people feel it's an even matchup.
We decided on these movies because we wanted to start the Halloween spooky season from a celebratory point. We picked a versus, which is always going to be contentious. And I think we went in believing, this will be a good matchup, only to find out that this is one of the most one-sided versus episodes you will ever hear. Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision. GenreVision is a weekly movie club where we discuss horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And this week, we kick off the spooky season celebration. Happy Halloween month, everybody. It's always Halloween here at GenreVision. We love horror, and we wanted this October to be a big celebration of horror, fun, classic, good old spooky season cinema. And we wanted to kick things off with a versus episode between two 80s effects-driven horror movies. This is Fright Night and Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. I think both of these movies have more than earned their respected cults, but we are doing a versus, and so I think it's best for us to start off with probably the movie more people have seen, which is Fright Night.
Yeah, let's do the bigger ticket item first, because that's going to bring more ears and eyes to the show. So Fright Night obviously is the 1985 Tom Holland, I guess people could call it a horror classic now, or certainly a cult classic, but it was successful enough to get a sequel and a remake, and then the remake was successful enough to get a sequel of its own. So it's a legitimate franchise at this point. And it's a very familiar story template. It is a small town vampire story. Even if it isn't, taking place in all that small town, it definitely feels very small. They want the suburb to be portrayed as like a very limited location here, and they do a good job making it feel contained. Even when the locations are a little bit more urban, kind of like alleyways and things like that, or nightclubs.
Yeah, and the basic setup is that this is Rear Window, but the perpetrator is a vampire instead. That's the kickoff.
There is a Rear Window a moment early on, and it abandons the Rear Window structure fairly early.
Immediately, practically.
Yeah, almost. And then from that point, it is a bit of like a Salem's Lot thing.
Yeah, it is that, hey, there's this vampire in the neighborhood, and one person, our trusty lead boy who looks about 25.
Yep, Charlie Brewster.
He knows, and nobody will listen to him. And I give Fright Night this. It does not drag out the idea of, like Rear Window, or I didn't see Disturbia, but I assume Disturbia, that this kid knowing what's going on is going to be a big dragged out part of the movie of, I know, but the killer, the bad person doesn't know, and I'm trying to sneak around and get to him and stop him without necessarily alerting him. Fright Night pretty much immediately, once Brewster sees what's going on over there, that vampire, Jerry Dandridge, played by Chris Sarandon, locks eyes with him and knows exactly that he's been revealed. And now it is this silent game between the two of them of, well, Jerry's going to try and kill you, and how are you going to protect yourself from a vampire? That aspect of Fright Night I like quite a lot, is that it gets right into what you want.
Yeah. Now, there are, of course, other peripheral characters that add to this whole like Jerry dynamic. There is his girlfriend Amy, played by Amanda Bearsey, and then you have his best friend Evil Ed, played by Stephen Jeffries. And these are aspects of the film that are frankly bungled, in my opinion. Amanda Bearsey's character Amy she's given this subplot about being a reincarnated version of one of Jerry's past great loves. And that goes nowhere fast. And also the relationship between Amy and Charlie is just awful. The movie opens on a scene between them, and they're getting down, having a little intimate time, but the big act, I guess you could say, is something that they're not quite ready for. And Charlie keeps getting distracted by horror on the TV. He's watching his favorite show by Peter Vincent, a horror host played by Roddy McDowall.
Always welcome.
Yep.
yes, the dynamic between Charlie and Amy, it sucks. And part of it is that it's dated, but I think it sucked back in 1985.
Sure.
And people just weren't hip to that. It sucked because it's the entire thing is that, oh, they're not ready. But then Charlie's kind of pressuring her and she feels that he's not paying enough attention to her and that it's just bad. There's a way to write this particular dynamic that could be intriguing and make sense, I think, to the overall. There is an overall theme going on. It's not one I'm stoked on with as far as that through line goes, but it's just not great. It doesn't make me like Like this watch really solidified for me. I'm like, I don't get why people like Charlie Brewster so much, other than he's
a horror nerd.
Well, he's like just a guy that you can put yourself, your proxy into and be like, oh, I could be the kid that his neighbor was a vampire. That's about it.
I guess he's male Bella Swan.
Sure. I mean, it kind of.
But anyway, it even like ticks me off a little bit more because like Amanda Bearcy is better than what the role is. Like she doesn't deserve a role that's written as this poorly. Like she gets a lot of screen time as Amy, and yet Amy never feels like a proper perspective character at all. She's kind of moved along by the whims of the plot, and that kind of bums me out. That is something that they did manage to improve in the remake, where Amy is played by Imogen Poots. But anyway,
yeah, I've not seen the remake, and I don't want if commenters want to talk about the remake, I've not seen it. Maybe I'll see it after doing this, but staying on a positive note, I will say Chris Sarandon. You're saying the role for Amanda Bearcy isn't up to her quality. Chris Sarandon is absolutely jiving on what this movie should be.
Oh yeah, Roddy McDowall, and then maybe the guy that plays Jerry's familiar.
Oh yeah, like
the quote unquote carpenter.
Yeah, Billy Cole, Jonathan Stark.
There we go. Yeah, Jerry's definite gay lover. So Chris Sarandon seems to be like the really defining performance of the film. Even in just his movements and the small things, the moment, the rear window moment where Charlie looks out his window and sees Jerry standing there, embracing a topless woman from behind, and they lock eyes. Charlie and Jerry lock eyes for the first time, and then Jerry reaches his hand out to pull the window shade down, and there's this great close up on the finger extensions that they've put on Chris Sarandon, and they're like, "Ooh, that's creepy! Like his fingers look so nasty." So it's a nice moment to see, and it's in moments like that this movie really shines, and why I think it's done so well.
On that note, I want to say the thing that I think has solidified Fright Night as a cult classic and why people love it, and why I understand why they love it, because I love a lot of this part of it, is that when this is being a monster movie, when it's being an effects movie, this shit rules.
Yeah, it absolutely shines bright.
Every there's a great melting body effect. There's a wonderful transformation in which Jerry leaps from the top of the stairs and turns to this bat creature, and they do this really cool animation thing. Like all of that stuff, there's hardly, if any, weak points in this as an 80s effects driven horror film. In some ways it's really, really good.
Yeah. My two favorite sequences in the movie are the final showdown, as you've described it, which has some just incredible effects stuff. And then the scene where Evil Ed attacks Peter Vincent. And so Ed turns into a wolf, as he can once he's, been turned into a vampire. And then once he's impaled on a stake, he turns into this sort of like half wolf creature. He almost looks like the Gollum deformed version of the werewolf from Bad Moon.
He has this devolution sequence where he goes from being wolf to being more and more human. And we see, I think there's like one or two stages of that we see until he's finally just Ed again.
And it's really gross and like pitiful. It actually sells the emotion of it. It makes me sad that Ed and Charlie don't have that like final moment together as friends. I feel like emotionally that would have paid off better.
Good point. Yeah.
But Ed definitely comes across as like so pitiful and pathetic in that moment of somebody who was like socially awkward and just couldn't manage to really make friends all that well. And then in that moment of him like dying alone, it is legitimately sad because like Ed, like I'm also like aware enough to understand that like while Ed is like super annoying, I also realize that that's probably not something he can control. So seeing him die like that was like legitimately heartbreaking for me. It is on every watch, and the effects are so great. So that's a fantastic sequence, but it certainly doesn't hold candle to the big climactic moment. But even before we get there, there are lots of little moments sprinkled throughout that give little jolts. There is a sequence where Amy and Ed hire Peter Vincent to go over to Jerry's house to prove to Charlie that, oh no, it's not actually a vampire. And yes, Charlie, you're delusional. But that moment where Peter Vincent uses his mirror and does not see Jerry in the reflection, it's a little jolt. It's nice.
The only other thing I will give some, I don't know about credit, but at least some interest to, is the big queer read of Fright Night. This movie is unabashedly gay coded. Like to the point where it's hard to even call it coded. Like it leans so far into being about these two gays moved in next door and they're monsters.
Mm-hmm. And they'll steal your girl. Exactly.
So actually examining that as a subtext, that is interesting. Like I think the actual subtext philosophically is kind of abhorrent. Like it's really an ugly, dated, like gay panic movie. But the fact that it's there is stimulating and interesting and invites deeper reads of the material.
I don't think the movie's not necessarily like moralizing that, saying like, oh, the gays are bad and coming to get us. I think movies can be about dissecting gay panic and depict gay panic without indulging in gay panic themselves.
I think this is coded enough to be like, there's easily people that can see, and this is like the Commando discussion where we talked about just how incredibly gay Commando is, and some people were like, Commando's gay? Yeah. Yes, yeah, and Fright Night is another thing where it's like, now there's been enough written about it and enough. I've even seen a positive. I read a very positive gay perspective over at Gaily Dreadful about seeing this movie, but I really think the text of it is saying that like these deviants, they are deviant people that have moved into our perfect little neighborhood.
Yeah. Deviant people that have a very clear homoerotic relationship.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But I mean, even if you remove the blatant homoeroticism, it's just like, oh yes. What do the monsters represent, as always? And in this one, it is like, this is this weird, deviant, effeminate, it's not even fair to call it gay. It's like, oh no, they're bisexual, they're queer, whatever you want, whatever label you want to say. It's just that this thing has invaded our perfect white picket fence neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, I mean, foreigner panic or like interloper panic has always been a crucial part of vampire stories ever since Dracula.
Exactly.
Dracula was all about the fuzzy-handed foreigners moving into London.
With their long noses. Yeah, their hooked noses and stuff.
Bringing all the pestilence and vermin with them. Yeah. And it's the same bullshit that we have, we fear today. Oh, the Mexicans are bringing COVID across the border. Give me a fucking break.
Well, here's the thing is that Dracula is an untouchable classic, so worthy of discussion. And while not a personal favorite of mine, a great book. Fright Night can be that while also having this really kind of ugly subtext to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like both things can be held true. It's like you can just because you like Fright Night doesn't mean you hate gays.
Sure, of course. I imagine there are plenty of queer people out there who really like Fright Night because it's gay.
Exactly. The piece that I read about it was saying it's like, I saw that movie. I'm sorry I don't have the piece up, but if you go search on Gaily Dreadful and just search Fright Night, I'm sure you'll find it. But the author was saying it's like, it was the first movie where I recognized gay characters because Charlie's mother talks about them moving in. And it's like, oh yeah, so he's supposed to be some, I can't remember what she thinks his profession is, but she's like, he's even got a live-in carpenter. My luck, he's probably gay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The movie knew.
And then this article, this person said like, hearing that and hearing it as an affirmation and then seeing it was a being seen moment. And it's like, okay, like that experience is 100% valid. Again, as I will say, the fact that text and subtext is there makes the movie more interesting. But I think the subtext is, it's like, oh yeah, that's ugly stuff. It's not nice.
It is theorized by a great many people, and it's accepted as kind of common Hollywood knowledge that Roddy McDowall was gay.
No.
Yeah, you don't say. And so casting him as this Peter Vincent role as this theatrical old queen, with his makeup and his
lives alone.
Oh yeah, permanent bachelor. That putting him in this role, I think folks like Tom Holland, in the director's chair, he would have known.
I definitely think so. So we got to mention Roddy McDowall and focus a little bit. Roddy McDowall is always great. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anything where I haven't liked Roddy McDowall, but here's the thing. Get to your keyboards and get in that comment section on GenreVision.com. Roddy McDowall is too good for this movie.
Oof. That is a take. It also, one could also say that he elevates this movie way past what it would have been without him.
Here's the thing. Come at me, everybody. I know this is, I hate being the one that has to take this position, but I'm going to throw myself on that sword. The majority of Fright Night is exceptionally dull. It's a really dull movie. Now, I want to make a distinction. Dull and boring are different.
Sure.
It's not necessarily a boring movie. There are things going on in the script and in the momentum of the plot and individual moments and scenes that it's like, okay, this is interesting, or this is engaging, or this is moving things forward. But dull is like, this is kind of the least interesting way to do this.
I would agree. And, I don't dislike Tom Holland as a director, but really where I really think he excels when it comes to effects. And that's why something like Child's Play, which has to integrate effects in so many clever ways, particularly with regards to like Chucky's scale. Mm-hmm. That movie spreads its effects gags out. Like, even when it's playing the long game of like, is Chucky alive? Is Chucky real? And it takes a while to get there. Like, it's still spreading things out in a really interesting way. And the suspense of that film works much, much better than Fright Night, where, Jerry is immediately sort of like apparent as the vampire, and the character dynamics and exploring that suspense of the whole premise, they just don't really sustain the tension like they should. And so it often becomes a game in Fright Night of just like waiting for the next big gag. And sometimes it's just too few and far between. Well,
sometimes the gag doesn't come. It just holds off and continues. There's so many things. In as much as I like that the vampire hero dynamic is immediately incited, I actually think that for the kind of movie Fright Night is, maybe they should have held off on that, because as the thing that the movie has become so famous for and beloved for is this big monster explosion effects movie. And again, that stuff is great, but it has a much more classical mindset. And it's like, we're saving it all for the third act. Keep your shirt on, hang on, stick with these characters, stick with this story. When we get to the third act, boom, baby. And that is a totally classical way of doing things. There's plenty of movies I like that do that. But for this structure, and especially like you said, in that moment when we see Jerry's claws close the window shade, the promise has been made. It's like, this is monster time. And then the majority of the movie hangs off on that a lot. It'll give you little bits and pieces here. Maybe Jerry will put some contacts in, but for the most part, it doesn't really deliver on that promise of the claws as much as it really should until the very end.
Yeah. It is that climactic battle at Jerry's house that really makes the film remarkable. It's like, you know, these last 10 minutes are like, oh, wow. Oh my God, that guy and that guy. Like it's just this explosion, this symphonic, eruption of effects gags, and some actually quite funny bits as well. Like the whole sequence where the familiar, the caretaker, is shot in the head and gets back up and is, staggering up the stairs again. It's like, oh, this is cool. This is really fun.
All that stuff is great. Like, but it really does feel like the delayed gratification hurts it.
Yes, for sure.
That's my biggest thing with Fright Night. All my other issues with it, it is really like, yeah, when you get there, it's awesome. But man, it feels like a long time getting there.
There's that whole interminable sequence at that nightclub. Ugh.
Oh, that goes forever. Well, that's not, vampires don't need to be sexy, but when vampires are trying to be sexy, they better be sexy. And the vampire sexy stuff in this, 9 times out of 10, is so flat
Yeah.
And so just like libido killing.
Which sucks because Chris Sarandon was gorgeous.
Of course, he was an incredibly gorgeous man. He has incredible sexual charisma. And there are hot moments in this movie.
Sure.
Like,
oh, yeah.
But again, like the effects, they are few and far between. Like they're not, it's just not there. And like you said, part of that has to do with the plot where the entire story of Amy being this resurrected love, it feels like a hat on a hat.
Yeah.
The original hat is a vampire moved next door and he's going to get you. And your friends don't believe you. And he'll end up getting your girlfriend. But then this whole idea of that she's a resurrected love, it's like, you really didn't need this because it doesn't really come to a satisfying arc at all.
It's a movie that has a lot of promise to it, and I feel like it was actually a really good candidate to be remade. Again, I don't want to deliver a whole lot of judgment on the remake right now. I don't have a ton to say about it either, but it is the kind of movie where the premise is pretty evergreen. It's a very familiar premise immediately. It's a small town vampire story. It's Dracula. The characters are kind of crystal cut in a lot of ways. So
it doesn't even have to be vampires. It's shadow of a doubt,
Sure.
It's just this person comes into town and they seem totally fine, but there's a dark thing going on with them. There doesn't even need to be a supernatural element.
Right.
Like you said,
monsters can be not supernatural.
Sure. And it's a time tested idea, but I just think that Fright Night doesn't the big thing Fright Night has going for it is like, it's the 80s. This is the effects boom. We're going to show you some serious effects vampire shit. And it delivers that. It absolutely delivers that. And it is some great stuff. As a clip, it's some of the best 80s horror effect stuff you will see. But a clip is not a movie.
Yeah, a clip does not a movie make. And unfortunately, the stuff between the big moments in Fright Night just isn't enough to sustain it. However, in our second movie, there's something going on between the big moments that makes it so watchable.
So this is Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. I think at this point, kind of infamous sequel, because it's not really a sequel. It has nothing to do with the first Prom Night, which was a Halloween, Friday the 13th slasher ripoff during that big slasher boom in the early 80s. All it has in common with that is that there's a prom night and the title. Otherwise, this is a totally original story. This is from 1987. It starts sometime in the 50s. I can't remember the exact year. I want to say it might be 57, so it's 30 years later. And there's a prom going on, and Mary Lou Maloney, who starts the movie in the confessional telling the father that, she's done horrible things. She's had impure thoughts of her boyfriend. She's wished horrible violence on her enemies and friends and all this kind of stuff.
And she's slept around. And she's loved every minute of it. And it's oh man, what a mission statement for this fucking movie.
That's the introduction to this character, is that she confesses all these horrible things. And of course the father's like, my child, these are very serious sins. And then when she says, the other thing, Father, I loved every minute of it. Cut to, in the confessional, she is written in lipstick for a good time called Mary Lou. It's like, all right, we're on.
Yeah, I love that this character, and maybe this is kind of looking back at it with a more contemporary view of it, but I feel like the movie isn't actually judging this character very harshly for being promiscuous. I think there are certain things that she does where it's like, oh, that kind of behavior is like annoying or uncouth, or she's like rude.
Well, no, she goes too far by the end of the movie in certain ways.
But by the end of the movie, she has a revenge motive, which is earned. Yeah.
Yes. But there's at least one moment in this that people are gonna be like, that's a bridge too far for me in terms of her sexual agency.
This movie goes uncomfortably far in moments, and it actually feels in those moments like this is dangerous art. It's exciting. Yeah, and I don't necessarily mean in the arousing way. I mean like
not for the thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, but like I feel in some moments where it's like, oh my God, like I really can't believe this movie went there. And here's the thing, like this movie isn't all that I would say out there in terms of horror. It's not a real boundary pushing film in those ways. What is unique about it is that the villain is actually quite identifiable and is persecuted essentially for being a kind of modern day witch.
I mean, call it like it is. This is a movie about slut shaming.
Yes.
Like it, and I think by the end, it has gone to a point where it's like, all right, that's a little much, but and certainly some of the her victims are completely her first victim is incredibly innocent, and it's a sad death.
Sure.
But so Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2. Okay, Mary Lou goes to the prom. She ditches, I believe, what was her prom date to make out with another dude. And,
her prom date was this guy named Bill.
Oh yes, Bill.
And so Bill, who was previously known as Billy when he was a kid, but she wins prom queen after spurning him, and he finds her making out with some other guy. And so what does he do? When she's accepting her prom queen crown, he hides above her in the flies on stage and drops, essentially it was like a firework above the stage, but it rolls under her skirt and lights her on fire. This was not his intended effect. And so immediately, as she is like fully ablaze, hairspray just whoomph, he is immediately crying about like how like guilty like he feels about this. Mm-hmm. It is an immediate expression of regret from him. He is not enjoying having lit his girlfriend on fire.
No, it's not a good time for him. Then we cut to, I believe it's 30 years later. Might be 20, but I think it's 30. And we have a new protagonist, Vicky, who is clearly in a very repressive household in terms of religion. Like her mom she's just one dirty pillow away from being Piper Laurie.
Oh God. Yeah.
Like, so she's, extremely Christian. The dad is just this, quiet, affirming, like, yes, dear type. And Vicky doesn't seem to be like the most popular girl, but she's the nice, sweet, innocent. And she's going to end up getting possessed by Mary Lou's spirit, because this is a possession movie. Now, before we keep talking about the plot, something I want to highlight here, and something that I've seen this movie before one time and within about a year or two. And this is my first revisit of it. And something I didn't really remember or connect with on the first time is that we put this up against Fright Night, which I think most people would say is like, it's kind of a horror comedy, it's got comedic elements, but it's fun. And Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2 is fun, but this is tonally pretty fucking dark.
It is, actually. I did not expect this to be. It's not dour. It's not super po-faced. It's not serious.
No, it's just like genuine. It's like genuine horror.
Yes, it's actually moody. It's really moody.
Yeah.
It's not wacky in the ways that you might expect from this kind of film, but it does things like, instead of, using a lot of cuts in a scene, there is a scene where Vicky is comforting one of her close friends about, a breakup, and what is it? Is there a pregnancy scare?
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, she is pregnant. She's talking about this guy. I thought he was going to be the one. He told me he loved me, and then he ditched me, and he left me something to remember him with. I'm pregnant.
Yeah. But they do this scene in one take, and the camera is just doing a slow push in from across the set. And I'm like, there's such an intentionality in this direction, in slowing the pace of this scene down and actually letting these two characters, really establish their physical dynamic in this moment. Like seeing Vicky comfort her friend. It's like, this is something different than what I expected. There's a directorial intent here that is delivering a different tone than I expected.
Right.
And I think that kind of intentionality comes across not only in every scene, but actually more and more and more as the film goes on. It's a very deliberately directed film.
Yeah, and that's not to say, like you said, it's not dour. It's got genuinely fun and even wacky moments. Like some of the deaths are like conceptually very goofy, but I don't think the movie is ever sticking its tongue in its cheek about itself. It knows how to have fun without making fun of itself.
Yes.
And therefore it is able to maintain this really, really good tone of like, this is a legit horror movie. It's trying to be scary. It's trying to be weird. In a lot of ways, it feels like the people up there in Canada were like, well, we want to make a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but we can't. So what are we going to do? Oh, we've got this prom night thing. Let's just use that and turn it into kind of a Nightmare on Elm Street. It, in a lot of ways, it's a little bit, this should have been a shelf pick, actually. It's a little Nightmare 2.
It is. Where the sort of monster is erupting out from inside our protagonist.
It's a possession story, and there's even, I think, some homosexual elements in Prom Night 2 as well.
Yeah, not nearly as much as Nightmare. Nightmare 2.
No. That's very. I mean, in this, you could say it's even bisexual or pansexual or whatever, because Mary Lou is just this purely sexually driven force, which obviously
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call it purely sexually driven, but there's this like air of deviance about her that her sexuality is somehow deviant.
Well, sure. When I mean pure, I'm talking about like it's uncut. Like she is not going to hold back on any sexual impulse, no matter how socially deviant it may appear.
Sure.
Because I mean that while she's possessing Vicky, she'll make out with Vicky's dad, which is the moment I was
shameless.
Yeah, I mean so anyways, throughout all of this, Bill, our trusty Bill, has grown up to become Michael Ironside, which immediately Michael Ironside's in a movie, like that's +1 star. It's pretty hard to mess up Michael Ironside.
It also makes the movie about 20% more Canadian, and it was already very Canadian from the start. Yeah. And so Bill, played by Michael Ironside, is now the principal of the same high school all these years later. He has a son, Billy, played by Louis Ferreira, who was in Us. He was in Saw 4. What else did you recognize him from?
He's in Breaking Bad. When Walter White says "you're goddamn right," the guy he's saying it to is
okay. Yeah, he's a really popular TV actor, so good for him. Anyway, there is this trunk kept in like the attic that has Mary Lou's remains in it because they've covered up her death. And I guess the time is right for Mary Lou to possess Vicky and sort of turn Vicky's life upside down.
I think the reason being that Vicky's friend, I think she takes the crown because she's doing some like art project.
That's right. Yeah, she doesn't like, or Mary Lou doesn't like that her crown's been taken.
Yes, and that's what awakens her spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is this possession story going on, and Bill, Michael Ironside, eventually has to come around to the idea that okay, Mary Lou's back. Now the guy that Mary Lou started macking on 30 years prior at the prom has now become Father Cooper at the church.
Yeah.
And Father Cooper and Bill have these conversations where Father Cooper realizes like, oh my gosh, like Vicky is possessed by Mary Lou. Because Vicky keeps having these, she like is out in the graveyard one time standing in front of Mary Lou's grave, and Father Cooper's like, what are you doing out here? Like it's super late. Like what's going on? And Father Cooper starts to realize, and he's trying to perform an exorcism rite in the church and all this kind of stuff, and tells Bill like it's Mary Lou, she's back, and her goal is going to be to get revenge and eventually to possess your body.
Yeah. And now it would be really easy to play Michael Ironside and this priest, as the clear villains of the piece, right? It would be really easy to do that because they together they did something really bad. And
yeah, we know what they did last summer.
Exactly. We know that they dropped a firework under Mary Lou's dress accidentally and burned her alive, roasted her in an inferno of incredible horror. But both Michael Ironside's character and this priest, they're both clearly eaten up by guilt. Like, and even if they're not expressing it directly, it's clear in how they interact with one another. It's clear in how Bill interacts with his son, Billy. It's there in the performance, and Michael Ironside plays this character. It's not one of his big arch villain, type characters where he's really chewing the scenery. He's actually portraying this guy as remarkably human.
Yeah,
which
he's
I thought
a guy.
For this movie, I'm like really surprised.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy. Like it's like you said, a lot of people love Michael Ironside for his bigger, more character actor pieces, but this is a very straightforward role for him, and I think it shows why he's such a great, like, just legend of acting, because it's like he did this, and this could be any, pencil skinny, bald white guy, Canadian actor.
Sure.
And you could fill that role very easily. But Ironside makes it into something where it's like, you can just look at his face and you can tell, like, he doesn't have to say like, I feel guilt about what happened with Mary Lou. Like he can just you just see it on his face. He's an absolute titan.
You know who does just an incredible job though is Wendy Lyon as Vicky. I mean,
stuff
she's asked to do, you know, as the movie gets more and more extreme, you know, she does it with such style and aplomb, and you know, I really applaud her. You know, she has to do some bold stuff in this movie. Obviously, she's got to appear fully nude in one sequence that's memorably like freaky
for a long sequence, but still fun. My favorite death is in that sequence.
Oh yeah. Somebody gets smushed in a locker because now Vicky has telepathic or telekinetic powers rather. There's also a sequence where Vicky is alone in a classroom and she's staring at the blackboard, and the blackboard on the wall suddenly turns into this swirling blackwater maelstrom, and sucks her in, and like all the letters on the board get whirled around in the maelstrom. It's like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
Well, because these are these like Nightmare on Elm Street sequences where she's like going to sleep and seeing these weird things. She gets up and there is the words "help me" written backwards on the blackboard.
Right.
We see it forming, and she walks up to it, and then all black hand jumps out of the chalkboard and grabs her, and then when it grabs her, it turns into this big vortex, and that's symbolically and pretty literally in the movie when she has become completely taken over by the spirit of Mary Lou. There's no more Vicky.
Another one of the more bizarre elements in the movie that I absolutely loved and found genuinely freaky was that there is this almost like life-size rocking horse in Vicky's bedroom.
Oh yeah.
And there's one like nightmare scene early on where you get a really good close up on the sculpt of the horse's face. And the horse has a very sinister looking face, and it has these big red eyes with these slit pupils, and you're like, ew, what's going on there? And then suddenly the rocking horse's tongue flicks out of its mouth, and it's covered in slime, and it's genuinely disgusting. I mean, really repellent.
And it's like the veins on its face like bulge out more and stuff. This was the only part of this movie I'd ever seen. This is like a classic. Saw 10 seconds of it at like 1 a.m. when I was a kid and didn't even know what I was looking at. And then years later realized it's like, oh, that's Prom Night too. And that image stuck with me so hard because I'm like, yeah, that's that fucking freaky rocking horse thing. And then later after, because that's a whole sequence where Vicky is talking about like, leave, like, this is my room. You can't be in here. Like, you know, leave, unclean spirit. But then when she has become completely possessed by Mary Lou, she's sitting on top of the rocking horse and its tongue is sticking out with all its slime and flicking. And she's like fingering the inside of its mouth. It's so gross.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's not actually gory or explicit. This isn't a terribly gory movie. It has gore. But it's not like a super gory flick at all.
It's got kills and it's got violence, but I would say it's not a very bloody movie. Like
That's true.
There's blood. There's plenty of great gore effects of, you know, eventually Mary Lou punches her way out of Vicky's chest at the prom.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very Demons.
Yeah, that's incredible. You know, the kid who's running the computer voting is going to change it, but change it to this girl that he's made a deal with, and
he gets ghost lightning to death through the computer, and it's glorious. Like, and it's such a in other movies it would be like, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. What was the name of that Rachel Talalay movie?
Ghost in the Machine.
Ghost in the Machine. It would be something. It would be like something from that, but instead it actually comes across as like a legitimately thrilling moment because the effects are like meeting the moment exactly where it needs to be.
They do and they do this with Mary Lou as well, is where it's like you do it in cuts. You just apply a little bit, apply part of the appliance, film that, cut, apply a little bit more, cut, and then cut back and forth between some other images, and it looks like there's this real great progression.
Sure. So we're running low on time here to talk about our verses here, but it's pretty clear that we think Prom Night 2 beats the prom dress off Fright Night.
Yeah, I mean, Prom Night 2 currently is streaming on Shudder as we record this. Unfortunately, Prom Night 2 does not have a restoration. The only widely available version is a cropped full screen version. Well, full screen back in the day, pan and scan as we would call it.
I believe it's a tape master. Yeah.
Yes, and I believe this is taken from the DVD release, which is the last official release of this movie. I do not believe this has not been remastered, and it's a crime.
Yeah.
Like this movie needs love and affection. It needs rediscovery, reappraisal, and restoration. Mary Lou, Hello Mary Lou, Prom Night 2 is awesome. And if you haven't seen it, this is like a legit good spooky season movie because it's just fun enough without being so like, we're having fun. Like instead,
and it's just dark enough to not bum you out.
Yeah, exactly. It has a great tonal balance. It delivers the gags and the spooky stuff, the horror stuff, at an extremely good pace.
And a great fucking ending. Ooh,
yeah,
love that. I love that ending.
Oh yeah, the ending is great. If you listen to our Petey Wheatstraw ending, it's another one of those, and it's perfect.
There's also a fridge full of fucking Labatt in this movie, which is very funny and a very Canadian thing, especially when you know that Michael Ironside has been a spokesperson for Labatt on Canadian television.
That's true.
Just this crummy Canadian beer for people who get shit-faced and watch hockey. No judgment.
And watch Prom Night too. So, but I want to say this, the verses, Hello Mary Lou, Prom Night 2, wipes the floor with Fright Night. We love it. And we want to advocate if you've not seen it before, if you haven't seen it in a long time, give it a shot. I don't want to totally down on Fright Night.
It has great moments. Great.
It does. And if you like Fright Night, then watch Fright Night as well. Like it's got some of the best effect stuff you'll see from a studio horror picture in the 80s. There's no question about that. So I think there's something here for everybody between these two. And I hope that we can, I know that Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2 has been getting something of a rediscovery and reappraisal just recently in the last couple of years. And we want to add our voices to that chorus. This movie needs love. It needs more fans. And it's a great way to kick off Halloween.
Yeah. And it was written by Ron Oliver, who, by the way, has written and directed episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps. Things that we have spoken about before on the show and things we will speak about later this month. I can't wait to talk about Goosebumps.
Absolutely. Now, we do have to head over to the shelf where we pick a movie that acts as a good pairing or sometimes substitute to our main topic. And we encourage you, loyal listener, to go to GenreVision.com and comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf picks, because the shelf is a collaborative thing. We're building this shelf of movies together here at GenreVision, and we want to hear your shelf picks for Fright Night and Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2. If you do leave a shelf pick in the comments, we will feature it on next week's episode. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Fright Night versus Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2?
Well, Nightmare 2, Freddy's Revenge would have been a great shelf pick. I almost kind of wish I had thought of that one. It's directed by a guy named Jack Shoulder, but Jack Shoulder also made a movie in 1987 called The Hidden. That is another kind of like goofy effects movie where it's like, oh, the effects are really, really notable, even when they're not of like really pristine quality. This is a movie where Kyle MacLachlan plays an alien bounty hunter, basically, who partners with a cop to look for this alien criminal that is basically a worm that goes from body to body and starts doing all these like super id focused things, like driving fast and like blasting music and like eating shitty food and getting really shit faced. It's like, it's just living pure id. It's like Hunter S. Thompson, the alien going from one body to another and just wreaking havoc in Los Angeles. It's pretty incredible. And it's not a great movie, but it is super fun. When you watch this alien worm pry its way out of one dummy head's mouth and then suck its way into another dummy head's mouth, you're like, this went right. This is correct. It is a fun 80s effects extravaganza that I would say probably doesn't have the production quality of something like Prom Night 2, certainly does not have the production quality of Fright Night, but it's still a good time. So I recommend The Hidden for that.
Agreed. And one of the great flamethrower moments in cinema is in
For sure. Yes.
Love The Hidden. Super fun time. For my shelf pick, I'm just going to sing the praises of a movie that we discovered this year. We talked about this on one of our more currently consuming episodes over on Patreon at patreon.com/GenreVision. So I will be brief, but another movie that we're trying to sing the praises of. And while it may not be the most Halloween-y movie, it's one that you will absolutely feel that fun Halloween spirit watching. This is Gnaw, Food of the Gods Part 2. That's Gnaw, Gnaw. Food of the Gods Part 2 rules. It is an absolute blast of a film with tons of great effects on a low budget. Does it have the best giant rats in cinema.
Oh boy, the only one in contention there is Princess Bride.
Fair enough, but I am definitely going to pick Food of the Gods Part 2 over The Princess Bride. Sorry, everybody. That's way more my vibe.
Fuck you, Rob Reiner.
I'm sorry. Food of the Gods 2, greater than The Princess Bride. This is the only place in the world, certainly on the internet, that you will ever hear that opinion espoused.
So what you're saying is that Food of the Gods Part 2 belongs in the Criterion Collection.
It's too good for the Criterion Collection.
Oh, babe.
But
here's the thing. It's kind of an underground movie. It's harder to find.
Yeah.
I think there is an HD copy floating around on there, but it's only like 720p and that's only because it's aired on TV, sometimes. I don't think it has a Blu-ray release at all.
No, it does not. Trust me, I have looked.
God damn, does it deserve one? Because this movie is so good.
It's absolute. I mean, we're talking about doing some awards at the end of the year, and if you listen to our Patreon pre-show for this, you can learn a little bit more about that. And if Food of the Gods Part 2 doesn't, it could possibly sweep the awards. I don't know, but it's definitely going to be on there. This is one that is absolutely worth hunting down, and a great way to spend some creature feature fun time. Now, we do have to head over to the listener shelf picks for last week's episode on Bedazzled and Bedazzled. JT went with South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, another sympathetic portrayal of Satan, and The Fog as an original remake comparison. I've never seen the remake of The Fog, and I probably will never. Mr. Milksteak went with, as an anti-shelf pick, Oh God, You Devil. I've also never seen any of the Oh God movies, although I know this one is not well liked. And a movie that I would be interested in watching, Evil Speak, the Clint Howard becomes a slave to Satan through his computer movie.
Oh, yeah, that's got a great poster.
Oh, fantastic poster. Yeah, and I believe that has a small cult following. I've never seen it. I would absolutely watch that. Maybe that I'm going to put that on the list for this Halloween.
For sure.
Eric Fuchs went with a movie I have a slight soft spot for. This is 976 Evil. I really watched this for the first time earlier this year. This is another one that I saw like late at night as a kid and just kind of, flipping back and forth through the channels because it was scaring me. And it's directed by Robert Englund. It's a decent movie. It's not bad. It's got some fun stuff in it, and stars appropriately for this week, Stephen Jeffries.
Nice.
Eric Fuchs also said The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus as well for another good devil movie. I mean, Tom Waits is the devil. You can't go wrong. Eric Johnson went with Amazon Women on the Moon, and of late I think of Cliffordville. The episode from the Twilight Zone, one of the hour-longs, one of the best hour-long episodes in that season. And also the Friday the 13th, the series episode, Brain Drain. Now, Stephen Isbella's shelf pick, which he says is kind of an anti-shelf pick, would be Wishmaster.
Oh.
And I kind of love Wishmaster. And so I'm gonna assume that it's like, a 70-30 with the anti part being 30 for you, Stephen, because
Drew, what you're saying is that Stephen Nisbella hating on Wishmaster hurt like hell.
Yes, that hurt like hell, Alexandra.
I told you guys Drew does a better Devoff.
Yeah, I've got Devoff's it's not what I can pull out a lot because Devoff's not exactly the most popular, but man, when I get to talk about the Wishmaster, I'm all there for that gin. I love Wishmaster. It's not a great movie, but I love it because it's just an effects extravaganza and a big goofy celebration of horror. But it's okay, Stephen. I'm still looking forward to your shelf picks for next week. And that goes for everybody. Thank you so much. Love having the shelf picks, and looking forward to the ones for this week. Now we have some quick calls to action, but stick around because Travis and I are going to be talking about what might be the best thing released this year. Now, we get to celebrate because we have a new review on the Apple Podcast Store. This comes from Chunt Station, great name, from New Zealand. Says 5 stars, best in class. My first choice movie discussion podcast. Oh, even if I disagree with the review or have no intention of watching the film discussed, the passion and intelligence of Travis and Drew still make this a joy to listen to. Their recommendations have greatly expanded the range of film and other media I've consumed, and it's been a fun journey. Keep up the good work, guys. Wow. Chun Station. I can't get too emotional when I say that name, which I like. That's very endearing. What a absolutely beautiful. Couldn't have asked for a better review. Thank you so much. And your review is legitimately helping out the show. So if you want to get me all verklempt like Chun Station just did, you can go to the Apple Podcast Store and leave a rating and a written review. We are so glad to have finally got one. It's been a while since we've had one, and Chun Station just left an absolute gem of a review. And if you do leave a review like Chun Station, we will feature it here on the show. And if you want some more GenreVision goodness, you can go to patreon.com/GenreVision, and you can become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month, and it will get you access to our weekly pre-shows that we do. As we mentioned before, we also do more currently consumings, where we just do big bunches of stuff that we weren't able to do on the show, and deeper cut stuff like Food of the Gods too. I think that was our August currently consuming episode. Tons of bonus stuff for all of the GenreVision podcasts, just a ton of material over there. If you want more GenreVision, you can get it over at patreon.com/GenreVision. Let's do some currently consuming.
Num, 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 num.
Travis and I both watched the new Mike Flanagan limited series on Netflix, Midnight Mass. This is apparently a story he's been had in his back pocket for a very long time, that's gone through changes. At one point it was going to be a novel, another point it was going to be a movie. And it really is, at this point, my favorite thing of the year so far.
It's one of the best pieces of media I've watched this year.
Yeah.
It's stunning. And I thought maybe Flanagan had kind of fallen into a certain groove, like, with his Bly Manor stuff. It's like, okay, he can sort of get the ball rolling on this, and the series will sort of unfold. And it'll still be kind of like his vision, but he doesn't have to like be there for every single episode. And like that series ended up being really good. I really liked Bly Manor, but it was like, okay, what else is he going to do? Because like the last couple of things he's done have been really, really good, but they've also kind of like all looked the same with this really soft digital look. And I'm like, okay, what's next for Flanagan?
I do want to give him a little bit, is that I think he only directed one episode of Bly Manor. And of course he's probably the executive producer, but it feels like he's much more distanced from that. And that was something that was trying to riff on what he had done in Haunting of Hill House. So I'm sure he's probably got some script credits or something on that. But the point being,
I think he may have been the showrunner.
Yeah. But the point being that it felt more divorced from him particularly, especially reading. There's a great, essay on Bloody Disgusting that he wrote about Midnight Mass and kind of a little bit of this period of his career that we've been going through. And if it was all to get to Midnight Mass, it was all worth it, because there is recency bias here. I won't debate that, but I really think Midnight Mass has a good chance of being my favorite thing he's ever done.
It's fucking fresh. And here's the thing, the stuff that he's talking about in Midnight Mass, it's nothing new.
No, but it's bold, and
it's bold, and the way that he approaches it, and the angle that he chooses to kind of approach all this stuff, and the ways that he like integrates these themes and these sort of like commonplace horror tropes, the way he ties it all together makes it fresh, makes it feel real fucking fresh again. Woo!
It's just an affirmation that there is a language to horror, because and it's a very diverse and sometimes difficult language, because it's something that can encapsulate so many things. And Mike Flanagan is somebody who understands the language, the dialect, the intention behind the words of horror.
Yeah.
And Midnight Mass it's the most, you called it when we were talking about it, it's his most thematically strong piece.
For sure.
And I'm in complete agreement, but I just feel like it's so near perfect, if not perfect. Like it's a 7-episode order, which is odd. Like it's odd.
It's a strange number,
which feels like that was exactly what they felt it needed to be. And this is a thing, particularly with Netflix shows, where it's like, these things feel like they go on for an episode or two too long. Not Midnight Mass is exactly perfect and constructed to be, with its particular episode order and their length and everything, the way the story progresses from episode to episode. If just from a writing perspective, it's a miraculous work.
It should be said that it does take 3 episodes to really reveal what's going on. But here's the thing. I want to kind of come back to your comment about Mike Flanagan understanding the language of horror here. There are certain things and certain sort of phrases and notes that he uses in that first episode that made me say to Drew, hey, is this actually about XYZ? And Drew was like, how did you guess that? And I hadn't read anything about it other than that, like, oh, it's out and it looks good. And I was like, no, there were these things that he hit on in episode 1. Like, he made these points. He showed these images. I think that's what's going on. And you're like, you got it, man.
Yeah.
And this isn't to toot my own horn, but if I can figure out a few episodes ahead of time what's going to happen and still be completely involved in how Mike Flanagan is unfolding it all, there's something very right happening here.
I mean, it riveted. I did not want to stop watching it. And and we can't talk about a lot of it without really revealing what it is. And we don't have the time, unfortunately. I mean, honestly, I could talk for 2 episodes length about this thing. It's something that, considering he continually again and again is like, man, is this guy going to fuck up? Because he's not. And he's not in big ways. Like, everything he's doing that is, very directly from him is just knocking it out of the park. And then Midnight Mass comes around. I'm like, if this isn't your peak, holy shit. Like, because this is something I'm still enraptured by this and just how deeply, deeply thought out it is from every angle. Like, that not a shred, not an iota of this production, of this story, of these characters, of these actors is ever wasted or overstays its welcome or gets boring. It is an incredibly engrossing piece of horror fiction.
And we haven't even talked about the fucking acting.
No, I mean, the acting in this, it's just shocking. It's just shocking that great actors that you knew were great are somehow even better in this. Like, Hamish Linklater in a stronger, more loving world, this thing rockets him to the stratosphere.
This is going to be one of the performances of the year. There is no question for me.
Yes,
like, it's stunning.
And that's across the board. You have incredible stuff. Kate Siegel, Annabeth Gish, like, just it's a smorgasbord of just performances. If you just looked at the performances, it would be like, wow, this is great. I can't sing this show's praises highly enough. I say show, but it's like, what are shows? What are movies anymore? Like, this is, in my opinion, the cinema of the year at this point.
Yeah, it really does feel like that.
It's
as much as we like to clown on Netflix, we do have to thank them for actually making this format make sense and like actually, being there for creators who want to produce this kind of work in this format and like helping them make the best thing they could, because that's what happened here.
Oh, sure. I mean, granted, it doesn't happen without Hill House becoming this. From Mike Flanagan's essay, he said it was kind of a surprise how big it got. They really weren't.
And he was fucking miserable by when he made Hill House. Evidently, it was incredibly difficult to make and was not easy to work with Netflix on it.
Yes, and so because of the popularity of Hill House and eventually Bly Manor and seemingly the at least critical response to Dr. Sleep, he had the clout to come to Netflix and say, I've had this in my back pocket. There was you got to read that essay too. It's such a great supplemental thing to after you've watched the series, the movie, whatever, that says it's like, this was this thing that I kept it there. It was the most personal thing I've ever done. And at times I thought it was never going to exist. It was just going to be, one of those projects that you think about and spin wheels about, but it never comes to fruition. But he got there and he was able to make it. He was able to make it the way he wanted. It's an uncompromising work when you watch it, and
but also very reserved.
Oh yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that it has to go wacky. When I say uncompromising, it's like I don't feel like there's not a moment where I'm like, was that a studio note?
Yeah. No, it all feels very him and very deliberately realized and just so well formed. I'm head over heels in love with it.
Yeah, it is very likely it will end up being my favorite piece of cinema this year. And that's in a year where we've had stuff like Suicide Squad and Pig, where it's like, man, the stuff that's knocking it out of the park this year is really knocking it out of the park. And Midnight Mass might be the grand slam of them all. So that will end our first episode in our spooky season celebration, but we will continue celebrating, and it's time to go back to a classic, but a classic I don't see talked about enough. We're going to check out the Universal Frankenstein series, specifically the third entry, Son of Frankenstein, which brings together Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi.
This is from 1939. It is available in high def and on Blu-ray, so I encourage you all to watch it. I've never seen it before, but Drew goes to bat for this film, and we will find out. We will find out if it's worth going to bat for next time
on GenreVision.
Boo.
Boo scumps.
Boo scumps. Yeah. Gonna have a hard time not doing that every couple minutes on our Boo Scumps episode.